Hey guys, it's Eddie and today I am back with another movie review for you all. Now today's movie I recently watched and I've got a lot to say about it, so I'm just going to get straight to the reviewing. So without further ado, today's movie that we'll be reviewing is As Above, So Below, directed by John Eric Dowdle and starring Perdita Weeks, Ben Feldman, Edwin Hodge and Francois Civil. Now this film is a horror film and the plot follows Scarlett, played by Perdita Weeks, who is an archaeologist and a student who is determined to find the infamous Philosopher's Stone, supposedly perfected and created by alchemist Nicholas Flamel, that we all know from Harry Potter. That's immediately what it reminded me of, but he's not just a part of Harry Potter. And Scarlett's mission to find the Philosopher's Stone leads her and her crew of helpers, I guess, to the catacombs of Paris, where she believes that the stone is buried 370 feet below the earth. But as they venture into the catacombs, things start to unravel, strange things start happening, and old sins come back to haunt. Now, I liked this movie. I didn't love it. I liked it. It's one of the few modern horrors where the plot is genuinely interesting to me. And as a historian, well, a budding historian, I haven't finished my degree yet, I'm fascinated by this kind of thing. So Flamel and, kind of all of the historical aspects that are kind of creepy and weird. So Dante's Inferno, which is briefly introduced into this film as a theme, that kind of thing. But with such an interesting premise as this film had, with Nicholas Flamel and the Philosopher's Stone, and a setting as horrific as the catacombs, I felt that some opportunities were missed, unfortunately. Now, this film focused a lot on Flamel, but as I said, it introduces in the film throughout, particularly towards the end, themes of Dante's Inferno, so the message leading to hell, and the mouths in the floor, etc. I think this meant the film became rather jumbled, especially towards the end, when things from historical themes kept popping up and you recognise them, but together they weren't explained very well. They all just seemed to be plopped in. And I was like, okay, 5 minutes ago we were talking about Nicholas Flamel and the Philosopher's Stone, and now we're talking about hell and magic and we're seeing themes from Dante's Inferno popping up. So I think this film would have benefited more from just following one historical route. For example, if in the film they got into the catacombs and each layer was one of the levels leading to hell, or one of the levels of hell that we are sort of told in Dante's Inferno, that might have been better. I'm not sure, obviously, that's just my suggestion, but it might have saved the sort of jumbled mishmash that all culminated towards the end, which sort of had to rely on effective but very cliche jump scares in order to get that fright out of you, because in the end you were kind of like, well, okay, just give me a second, what is actually happening here? Because there were a lot of symbols and themes that popped up, but because they weren't, we weren't reminded of them at the start or, throughout the movie, they were just kind of there and they just served as a scare rather than, intricately linking to the history and the theme of the film. So I kind of wish that they had just stuck to one thing rather than trying to do everything like it seemed they were and include everything. Which is tempting, obviously, because there's a lot of interesting aspects to what, the stuff that they were trying to include, but at the same time, I think they should have just stuck to one, because the stuff about Nicholas Flamel was really interesting and it served as a great plot point, but then they started introducing other stuff into it and I was just like, guys, I have no idea what's going on towards the end. Moving on, the acting was adequate. I think that Hodge was a standout for me because his acting in the sort of trapped segment was really unnerving, and I truly, truly empathise with him. There's a moment in the film where they're crawling over a sort of floor of bones, and the space between the ceiling and the bones is very, very minuscule, and he becomes stuck at one point, and I was just feeling very, very afraid for him, and I think his acting was really panicked and felt very real, and it truly evoked a really frightened feeling in me, probably more than any other part of the film, because it was just so well acted. So I thought that Hodge really stood out, and Feldman stood out for me as well. I knew him from Mad Men as Michael Ginsberg. I love Mad Men, it's a great show. So when I saw that he was in this film, I was really pleasantly surprised, and I thought that his acting was great. And you know, he was kind of reluctant to go there in the first place, so he was kind of very relatable in the film. And yeah, I enjoyed his acting and Hodge's acting probably more than any other people in the film. I thought that the lead character Scarlett wasn't likeable in the slightest, and Weeks' acting as Scarlett was sometimes a little bit OTT, and she did this thing where she was, you know, processing all the things in her head that could be possible, and she was like, oh well, the stone must be here, and she was trying to think of all the things that she'd learnt, you know, as an archaeologist, and I just felt like it was a little bit too much at times, and it was, I don't know, it kind of made me draw back from the film, which was a little bit unfortunate. I thought that she did as well as, you know, was necessary, but it kind of didn't leave me feeling like this was a real situation. Sometimes her acting just pulled me out of the reality of the situation, and that was unfortunate. But, you know, she fared okay in the film. She wasn't perfect, but I think it was the character that really sort of didn't sit well with me, because, you know, although she did show remorse when things started to turn sour in this film, you knew that the whole reason why they were down in these perilous catacombs was because of her, and she just very selfishly just wanted to keep going and keep going on. I'm like, gal, I know this is for your, you know, you're an archaeologist and you're passionate about this, but come on, like you've got to stop, because there are people that are getting hurt, you know, as is natural in a horror film towards the end, or, you know, throughout the middle of the film, characters start getting bumped off, and she kind of just annoyed me because she was a little bit, she seemed to want to just sacrifice everything for the Philosopher's Stone, and I get it, but, you know, also not knowing completely that it would actually be there and what you'd find in the catacombs on the way to get to it, she just seemed, I don't know, I just didn't think she was a very endearing main character. So that was, again, an unfortunate part of the film. And I also drew back from the film in some corny moments which were unfortunate. So there were a few, it was hinted throughout the film that Scarlett and George had a little bit of a thing in the past, and, you know, it didn't end well. But while they're down in the catacombs and they think that everything's going to end and their life is flashing before their eyes, you know, they share a moment, and I was just like, did we really have to do this? I mean, I know it's that kind of situation where it's like, we're about to die, so let's say nice things to each other kind of thing. But it made me become rather disillusioned with the whole thing, because I thought that, would this seriously happen? And I don't know why there's always a romantic plot point that seems to be thrown hastily into a film that kind of, it's always there, and sometimes I just think that it isn't necessary. And I think with a horror film that has got such strong a strong idea like this one had, I thought that sort of confused everything a little bit and made me focus on that, which wasn't particularly well delivered, let's say. I don't think the romantic element was very well delivered. So yeah, I just kind of straight up cringed at that moment, and it was kind of unfortunate because it was going really well at that point. But yeah, I just thought that that was kind of unnecessary and kind of ruined the feeling of the film for me. Now, the scariest parts were the catacombs themselves for me. I thought they were a brilliant setting, and the claustrophobia was so severe, and it was an element that I really enjoyed because, you know, as a found footage horror, you're right up in there with them. So when they were crawling through these tight spaces and they were going down these, you know, long wells and shafts, it was really, really unnerving and uncomfortable. And I think that that was one of the strongest points of the entire film for me, and it was brilliant. But overall, I feel that it was a great idea with too many themes that became that were left unexplained, and it was a concept that wasn't fully realised for me. So I had to find scares in the exteriors, which was unfortunate. So like the catacombs and like the moments when they were sort of crawling over bones, and you know, it was a very tight space that they were in. And honestly, if I had to give this film a rating, I'd probably give it 3 out of 5 stars. I think again that it was a brilliant idea. It just wasn't, you know, performed that well. I think the film let itself become too consumed with like the historical elements and the symbols from history that were not clarified and became jumbled. And I think that it had some real potential, but it just fell flat in a few areas for me. But that is my take on As Above, So Below. I would recommend it as a film for any budding horror fan to watch. It's not a bad film by any means. It just is, as I said, a little bit confused in what it wants to achieve. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Remember, you can always request movies for me to review by messaging me on my Tumblr. Link is always in the description, or by commenting below. But that is it for now. Hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in the next review. Bye!